Hello and welcome to another episode of a Brothers Creed podcast. We talk about motivation, experiences, and exploring the world around us. We are the Thomas Brothers. I'm Ethan.
And I'm Jared. And today we're talking about the famous father and son duos. This is the week of Father's Day. So we figured, hey, what a good time to talk about father-son duos. Actually, one of mine isn't really a duo. It's kind of a father and all of his kids. But we have some interesting ones. This is an interesting topic. There's not a lot of father and son duos that work together out there, but there are a small handful. Mostly fathers doing something and then their sons kind of taking the reins after the fact. But there's some good stuff. Ethan's got some good ones and I've got some good ones. Actually, I have some YouTube clips to share as well, so we'll throw those in from some of the ones I have. So it's going to be a good episode. Good time to think about your father on this upcoming Father's Day and maybe give him a pat on the back and appreciation for all that he has taught you. So let's go ahead and dive in.
All right, let's do it.
Yeah, I'm thinking I'm back.
Most valuable commodity I know of is information.
And that, my friends, is called integrity. That's called courage. Now that's the stuff leaders should be made of.
Either you're somebody or you're nobody.
You're not the devil. You're practice.
All right, so father-son duos. This was a cool one. As Father's Day is coming up, it really took some research to get into finding number one kind of things that fathers and sons did together, but as well, and really a lot of the things that I found that kind of built upon that father-son relationship were fathers and sons that did similar things, that that kind of one started something and then the father started something and the son just continued on in that legacy. And I'll go through and talk about a couple, but one of the ones, I'll just jump into it. So I was actually doing some research, and I don't know if this is all of them, right? Mm-hmm. But I was looking into the relationship between fathers and sons that were presidents of the United States.
Oh yeah.
And there's a lot. It's like, why? It's not like the king gets passed to the prince, and it's weird. So, but a couple of the ones I looked at was John Adams, President John Adams, and John Quincy Adams. Mm-hmm. So John Adams was the second president of the United States.
Yep.
And was followed by his son, John Quincy Adams, who became the sixth president of the United States.
Several years later.
Yeah. And so it was the only instance in American history where a father and son had held the office of president up to that point, right? The second the second and the sixth president. And then Benjamin Harris. So Benjamin Harris and William Henry Harris. Benjamin Harris was the 23rd president of the United States, and he kind of played a really significant role in the Reconstruction era of the United States. And his father, William Henry Harris, served as the 9th president of the United States. But he had kind of a really short tenure as president. But that's just another one, too. They were the 9th president, his dad was, and then he was the 23rd president.
Interesting, yeah.
And then, can you think of any more?
The Bushes, obviously.
The Bushes, yeah. Right? So George H.W. Bush and George W. Bush. George H.W. Bush served as the 41st president of the United States, kind of during the end of the Cold War. And then his son, George W. Bush, served as the 43rd president of the United States, obviously kind of through the September 11 attacks and other, that was our generation.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting because that one was really close, the 41st and the 43rd, father and son. I mean, it's only two presidencies apart.
Yeah, sure.
But I guess if you had, 2 terms, and then if he was already, if he was in his 20s or something when his dad served 2 terms, and the guy after him served 2 terms. I mean, that's another 16 something years or even more.
Well, before Bush, it was Clinton, right? Clinton was the 90s.
Yeah, before George W. Bush.
And then it's George W. And
who
then,
did 2 terms, and then George W. H. Bush, H.W. Bush. But so that was it. So 41st and 43rd, and then John Adams was the 2nd and the 9th, and then Benjamin Harris was the 2nd and the 6th, excuse me, and then Benjamin Harris was the 9th and the 23rd. So I guess kind of between the 9th and the 23rd, there was probably a couple in there that didn't last very long. But I think it's just kind of cool. And I was thinking through this. Why does this happen? Right? How come, presidents and politicians, a lot of times their sons become presidents as well?
Depends on how deep you want to go down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, I know. It's like, there's these kind of these politician families like the Bushes or the Kennedys or, whoever else. Maybe someday, maybe someday Hunter Biden might be president. I don't know.
Oh dear, that would be the demise of that would be the last president. Well, who knows? Maybe I think right now we might be in the last president. I think that I've heard a lot of conspiracies about this. Starting at the top of the rabbit hole, I think that these people are kind of grown up into politics. They know what's up. They know how to do it. They know how to get into it. They have the contacts. That's like anything.
They have not only the know-how, but they have the who know how,
and
they know how,
and they have the name. I mean, if you're a Bush, or hey you're a Romney, or hey you're a Trump, or hey you're a, these
Kennedy.
names. Yeah, Kennedy. These names are like legends, and so I think I've heard other conspiracy theories. That go deeper. That like, George W. Bush joined the Skull and Bones Society, and they are the ones that kind of the puppet masters of this thing, and so they put him in, and then I've actually even heard the deeper that like all these, like most of the presidents are actually from royal families, so it's kind of like a pseudo.
It's all orchestrated. It's all the vote is basically just a dog and pony show.
That's how it felt last election.
Yeah. Yeah, well, made me feel like a pony-faced dog soldier.
There you go.
To quote the president.
To quote President Biden. Yeah.
So I thought that was
cool.
interesting.
Yeah, kind
of not really, father-son duos to a certain extent, but it's just interesting how it's almost like creating this legacy. And I kind of applied that to father-son duos of what kind of legacy are we creating, or am I creating, right? Yeah. Is the Thomas name, am I representing the Thomas name well? And am I going to teach my children to represent the Thomas name well?
Yeah.
So I don't know.
Yeah, very good. I agree. I was looking at it and like I was trying to look like I was curious if there were any like ancient conquerors or anything like that were father sons, and there are some of those, but like the life expectancy back then was so short. Where I mean, like maybe your dad wouldn't really live that long, so by the time you got to your prime, your dad's way well past his. He's just an old man, and so I know that there's a father and son duo that died at the Battle of Thermopylae with Leonidas. There was a father and son duo that died there. They fought together. But that's not the one that I covered. The one that I covered, actually, one of them was kind of in the movies. There's lots of father-son duos in the movies. You have Will Smith and his son, actually several of his kids. You have Clint Eastwood and his kids. You have Ben Stiller and his kids. You have George Clooney. His dad was in the movies in the early. You have...
Martin Sheen, Charlie Sheen,
and and then you also have Emilio Estevez. You have
Sheen,
Rob Lowe and his sons now kind of in acting.
Even like Angelina Jolie and her dad as well.
Yeah, exactly.
It's not father son, but
yeah. So there's lots of those, but I thought this one was kind of cool, and I have a couple clips about this one. Have you ever heard of the Skarsgårds?
Yeah.
So this is
There's like 3 of them that are.
Well, there's actually more than that. So this is a Swedish family. So Stellan Skarsgård is the father. He's the oldest one.
The father.
Yeah, Peter McAllister, the father. So he married, now they're from Sweden. He married his wife named Mai, M-Y. They were married from 1975 to 2007 when they got divorced. And he had 6 kids with her. That's a lot of kids. And then he actually remarried in 2009 to a lady named Megan. Megan's a very non-Swedish name, but I guess. But they had 2 kids named Ossian and Kolbjorn. I think that's how you pronounce it. There's a lot of things above the letters that are confusing. But they're just little kids. But so Stellan, his older kids, he had 6 kids. And so I'm going to talk about some of those. But first I want to talk about him. So he is a well-known actor in Sweden. He's done hundreds of films, more than 100 films. Not hundreds, but more than 100. And famously, more recently, he's been known for his roles in Dune, Chernobyl. I think we posted a video on our social media about him talking about Chernobyl. Like, he was the Russian guy that was sent to Chernobyl to kind of figure it out, and he's like, he's talking about it. There's a movie that came out, or a series called Andor that came out recently that he's in. And then he was also in Thor, the original Thor, and also I think he was in Guardians of the Galaxy. Oh, no, excuse me. Avengers, because he's like that crazy scientist guy, when they create that portal that opens up above New York City. Like, he was being mind controlled by Loki during that. So I have a one thing I love about this guy is he has such an epic voice. He's a great actor too. So I have a little scene here from the movie Andor. That's a great speech of his. I haven't seen the series, but I've seen the speech a couple times, and it's really cool. So I'll play it now.
And what do you sacrifice?
Calm. Kindness, kinship. Love. I've given up all chance at inner peace. I made my mind a sunless space. I share my dreams with ghosts. I wake up every day to an equation I wrote 15 years ago from which there's only one conclusion. I'm damned for what I do. My anger, my ego, my unwillingness to yield, my eagerness to fight, they set me on a path from which there's no escape. I yearn to be a savior against injustice without contemplating the cost, and by the time I look down, there was no longer any ground beneath my feet. What is my sacrifice? I'm condemned to use the tools of my enemy to defeat them. I burn my decency for someone else's future. I burn my life to make a sunrise that I know I'll never see. Now, the ego that started this fight will never have a mirror or an audience or the light of gratitude. So what do I sacrifice? Everything!
Yeah, so that was the scene. Pretty cool. He's got such an epic, gritty voice.
Yeah.
That's just quite epic. He is also, and his character in Dune, he's like this real bad guy, and he's very menacing. So it's pretty cool. But so he's the father, and he's been in this. He's got a ton of Swedish films too that I don't even know. Nobody. Well, I guess Swedish.
Somebody knows.
Somebody knows. But one thing I thought was interesting that he said, I never had ambitions for them, talking about his children, other than that they should be decent people. So I thought that was cool. He didn't really have his kids aspire to be actors or whatnot. So of his kids, let's talk about the first one, Alexander. Alexander, he was in the movie The Northman. He was also Tarzan, and he was absolutely jacked in both those movies. He's the eldest son, and he started doing movies at the age of 7. He was on a Swedish film about 10 years he did Swedish films for about 10 years, and then he quit acting for a while. He said in GQ magazine, "It was my way of going off into the unknown." And so he joined the military in 2011 just to kind of go do his own thing. After he was in the military for about 18 months, apparently a short stint, he went to visit his dad in LA, and his dad was like, "Hey, maybe get back into acting." And he got put in touch with his dad's agent, and then he went and got he said, "Hey, why don't you audition for something?" And he auditioned for Zoolander and got a small part in Zoolander for his kind of debut on the American scene. So that was pretty cool. And I forgot to mention that he was able to act with his dad in a movie at the age of 7. So that was kind of cool to be able to act with your dad.
Yeah, that'd be cool.
Another one I was going to mention, side note, and this is Kiefer Sutherland and his dad, Donald Sutherland. They also played in the movie together. So that was kind of cool. His other son, Gustav, he played in Vikings. I think he was Loki in Vikings. He was also in the movie...
Loki, I think is his name. Loki.
Loki? Oh, okay.
With an F, yeah, but yeah.
Floki? Okay.
With an F, yeah, Floki.
Okay. He's also in the movie Air, which I haven't seen, which it just barely came out, about the Air Jordans. And then he's going to be in the movie Oppenheimer. So that's kind of cool, which we will review in the next few months. So he always wanted to do acting like his dad. And so he just always had been focused. And as a teen, he turned down roles in soap operas and instead attended the Swedish National Academy of Mime and Acting College. Funny how there's still mimes. His stateside breakout was in the movie The Way Back. You remember that one, right? Where they break out of that Russian prison and they have to like hike out of like the Himalayas all the way down to Nepal. That was kind of a cool show. True story, I think, too, by the way. So that's Gustav. The other son, Bill Skarsgård, you know what he was in?
He was the one in John Wick, wasn't he?
Yeah, he was. He was in John Wick 4.
And he was also in It.
He was Pennywise in It 1 and 2. So the remakes, obviously, of It. So he's the fourth child. As a teen, he questioned if he wanted to be an actor. He kind of knew... He was like, do I want to be an actor because my dad's an actor, or do I really want to be an actor? And later, he got into the industry doing small shows, like Hemlock Grove and just like small stuff on Hulu and soap operas. And then he got his breakout role as this kind of lead in It. And so he also has other kids. I don't want to ignore them. Walter, who's an actor as well, but he's mostly just in Swedish films. He has a daughter, Elijah. She's a casting director. And then he has a son named Sam, who is a doctor. And then his other two kids, which are just little kids. So, yeah, kind of a cool family. And it's interesting how each of them, some of them are like, I feel like I need to find my own way. Or Bill Skarsgård, he was like, I was reading some interviews with him, and he was like, I wanted to go my own way. I didn't want to lean on my family name, so I went out and, applied for stuff. And it's like, dude, people still know your last name. So I don't know how much like he can just forge his own way. I mean, I think he wanted to do that, but like he's a Skarsgård. Everybody knows the Skarsgård, so it's like, okay. You have like the most recognizable name in like all the industry. So
well, and he probably wasn't applying to like McDonald's.
No, exactly. So I don't know how much he built his own way. But anyway, he's great. He did great at It. And all these guys are pretty decent actors. They all joke. They say that all joke around the dinner table about how many roles they've gotten and what they're playing, and so.
And then the one doctor's like, yeah, I saved a life today.
Yeah, exactly. While you guys were playing, I was saving lives. Yeah.
Yeah. While you were pretending to be doctors, I'm an actual doctor.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's another kind of family like that is, I guess, the Hemsworths, I think.
Oh, yeah.
As well. There's like 3 or 4 of them that do acting. But that's really cool. Kind of like the family, I guess, the father and kids type scenario. And that was one thing I kind of dug into as well, is father-son situations where like it seems like the talent kind of was passed from from the father to the son. Um, and maybe it was the talent just because there was exposure to that specific thing, or maybe it's some kind of just like built into their genes. And so a couple examples are Johann Sebastian Bach,
Yes,
right? We
the
all know who
celloist.
he was.
Oh no,
And the
no.
composer,
Yeah, the composer.
the composer, and then Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach. So Sebastian Bach was a German composer and musician, one widely regarded as kind of one of the greatest composers that ever existed. And his son, Carl Philipp Emanuel Bach, also is a very famous and achieved composer, and played a huge, significant role in kind of the transition of classical music in our day. And so it's just really kind of interesting how, Sebastian Bach, the guy that we know as like Bach,
Yeah.
and then you don't really hear about his son, but his son as well was an amazing musician and composer.
Yeah.
And it's like, well, was that like, forced upon him or drilled upon him as a child? Because Bach was a prodigy.
Yeah.
And so was it just like, was his son just a prodigy as well? Or is that like, inherent, or is it, passed down from generation to generation?
I think
just
that
talent.
I think that part of it is that like kids want to like you have the best teacher in the world. That's like you see that all the time with like basketball players, like and athletes that like imagine getting lessons from like a pro athlete. You're going to be really good if you get lessons from
your
a pro athlete.
entire life.
Yeah, your entire life. And then you like idolize that, and you're always on the baseball field or basketball court, and you're always like, oh man, like it just is kind of like you're just like born into that almost.
Yeah. So another one I thought was interesting was the Curie family. So we've all kind of heard of Madame Curie or Marie Curie. She was the one that studied kind of radiation, and then she ended up dying from radiation poisoning, and that's kind of where we got a lot of like X-rays. So Pierre Curie and Marie Curie were husband and wife, and they were French basically scientists that were pioneering some of the initial work on radioactivity. What's interesting is that their daughter, Irene Joliette Curie, followed in their footsteps and basically continuing on in the same studies, and actually ended up winning a Nobel Prize in chemistry for her research on artificial radioactivity. And so it was just kind of interesting how, even that science, that mind, right, the creative and that scientific mind, just really smart and intelligent, was passed down from parents to child.
Yeah.
And in that case, it was their daughter, right? We're talking about father sons, but I thought it was a good call out. And then the last one here on talent is the Earnhardt family, right? You got Dale Earnhardt, Dale Earnhardt Sr., Dale Earnhardt Jr. Dale Earnhardt Sr. was a legendary NASCAR driver known as the Intimidator. Right? Us being in North Carolina kind of is where a lot of this happened. There's a theme park here with roller coasters and everything. And actually one of the roller coasters, the biggest ones in the park, is called the Intimidator. And it's all it's kind of Dale Earnhardt themed.
Oh, I actually didn't know that. I actually didn't know that was Dale Earnhardt themed.
Yeah, so he was a 7-time Winston Cup Series champion. Senior was, and then his son Dale Earnhardt Jr. followed basically in the same footsteps and became a very successful NASCAR driver, winning numerous races and really kind of creating and building his own racing legacy. And that's just kind of like another. I mean, I guess they're the box of the racing world.
Yeah,
right?
I also looked at those guys, and I had something a little bit to share on those. It looks like they actually competed together. It wasn't just like here's the mantle, son. Like, you take it from here. They actually competed together in the NASCAR series one full season in 2000 before Dale Earnhardt Sr. died in his tragic car accident at the season opening in 2001, Daytona 500. So that 1 year, Junior's rookie season, and he admitted that he had something to prove. So one of the things he was saying is he said, "I raced Dad really hard. When I was out there, I was obviously trying to show him that I was capable of doing what I was capable of doing, and so I was probably over my head a lot of the time trying to do too much. There were a lot of instances where we butted heads at the racetrack on the racetrack." So like he talked about a story once where they were racing in Japan and Dale Sr. got mad at Junior and he threw a shoe at him while they were tangled a little on the track. It probably didn't help that during the race, Junior said he and his team stole a set of tires from Senior's pit box. They actually got approval to do it from the other team, but his dad got mad at him because he stole some tires from him. But there was one story where his dad clipped him or said something, and his son came up to him and he ran his right tire up the right side of his whole car, and they were pissed at each other, So it's kind of a cool thing to see those guys do that together.
That's funny.
I had one more.
I had one more. You go first because I just went through a couple of mine. You go first.
Yeah. So this one is kind of interesting. So I don't really follow much baseball or really any professional sports for that matter, but I thought this was a cool example. So this is an example of a father and a son who got to play together in a major league sport. There's a lot of examples out there fathers who played a professional sport and then their sons eventually did, but there's not a lot that their father and son played on the same team. So the Griffeys, they're called the Griffeys. Father Ken Griffey Sr. He was a well-accomplished baseball player. He was aged 40. So, not many. That's pretty much tail end of your career, right? In fact, he was playing for the Cincinnati Reds. He was a 3-time All-Star, 2-time World Series winner. He was nearing retirement, and they gave him an option to switch teams or to be forced retired by the Cincinnati Reds. And his son joined up with the Cincinnati Reds. And so he actually decided to just play one season with his son and then be forced retired. And so his son, Ken Griffey Jr., he was 20 years old. So this was kind of his first foray. And it was kind of a cool. They played one season together. Senior was in the left field. Junior was in the center field in their first game together. The two batted back to back in their first game. On the batting roster it said Senior, Junior, and then they each are kind of competing each other. One hit it up the middle. One hit a line drive kind of towards the first base, and later they played a game where they hit back-to-back home runs. They each hit home runs. That was cool, yeah. And the other outfielders, one of the outfielders said, "I don't like seeing." He said, "I don't like seeing it be done against us, but it was nice to see." So they played 51 games together, father and son, and then Junior eventually made it to the Hall of Fame. And in the Hall of Fame, he reflected on the time that he played with his dad. They're the first father and son to win an all-star game together. So I'm actually going to play a clip, just a short clip here of his acceptance speech to the Hall of Fame. It's just a couple seconds here, but he talks about him and his father and their time together. So let me see if I can play this here.
Say things that have never been said. I got a chance to play with my dad. I got to yell at him and tell him to get a hit. And in baseball, there's certain things you can call somebody a fossil, graybeard, grandpa, dad, pops, but I got a chance to say it and mean it. We hit back-to-back home runs. We're the first father and son. We're the first father and son to win MVPs in an All-Star game.
So that was just a little bit of his speech. He talked about his dad. He goes on and talked about other stuff, but pretty cool. And his dad's there, watching him and stuff at that acceptance speech. So anyway, I thought those the Griffeys. That was kind of cool that they were able to do that.
Yeah, I like that. That's cool. I'm sure that was a really just a lifelong memory experience that I'm sure they enjoyed together.
Yeah,
for sure. Well, I had one last one. This was kind of an interesting one. This one is, well, I don't need to preface it. I'll just get into it. So this is kind of an inspiring story of a father and a son that really kind of accomplished some amazing things together. And this is the story of Dick Hoyt and Rick Hoyt. So they were known as Team Hoyt. And
as in Hoyt
Rick,
Archery?
Yeah, so Hoyt, Hoyt.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't think there's any relation to archery, but
there's a brand of bows called, I think it's called Hoyt.
Yes, Hoyt bows. Yeah, there are. But the story doesn't have anything to do with that.
I thought this was the beginning of the bow dynasty.
No. Well, I mean, that'd be cool, but no. So Rick Hoyt, the son, was actually born with cerebral palsy, which left him unable to speak or walk. But kind of despite these challenges in his son's life, Dick, the father, he was determined to include Rick, his son, in kind of all aspects of life. And Rick could communicate. He just was he didn't speak like in sentences and stuff. So this journey began in 1977 when Rick, the son, kind of expressed a desire to participate in a local charity race that they had, like a foot race. And it was, I don't know if it was like a 5K or something like that, which is like 3 miles. And Dick, the father, didn't really have any experience with running, but he said, well, what the heck, let's do it. Right. And so he ended up pushing his son, Rick, in the wheelchair for the entire race. And really this kind of ignited like a passion in both of them to start to compete in different races. And they really kind of built up and actually ended up doing multiple marathons, triathlons, and even an Ironman together. Yeah. And so obviously Rick, the son, who's in a wheelchair, wheelchair bound, and he physically can't support himself, that put a lot of pressure on the dad, on the father. And so Dick, the father, he would swim, bike, and run, all while pushing Rick in a specially designed wheelchair and pulling him in a boat during the swimming portions of these races that he was doing. And so, I mean, he would just strap him to his, strap him on a cord and pull him behind in a boat as he was swimming, miles and miles. So they said that they faced physical and emotional challenges. Obviously, I'm sure that was extremely difficult, but their bond and determination and their excitement for what they were doing really kind of propelled them forward. And I didn't come with any videos, but I'll drop in some videos and some pictures of them completing some of these races. And it's emotional, right? Because you can see on both of their faces the accomplishment that the father is for being able to, number one, do these races. I mean, complete an Ironman just in general is an accomplishment, but to be able to pulls the dead weight of someone along the entire way, or push someone, on the pulling on the swim, pushing on the bike, and then on the run. And so it's just a really inspirational story. And so they went through and actually ended up competing and completed over 1,000 races. So 1,100 races,
wow,
including 72 marathons and 6 Ironmans.
Holy moly.
Yeah.
That's crazy. Full
And
Ironmans too, not
full
half of them.
Ironmans. Yeah. And so, which is, if I remember correctly, 2 miles swimming, and then
A
like
full marathon.
140 miles on bike or something like that, maybe more, and then a full marathon.
That's crazy. It's
Yeah.
wild.
So, there's that, and then it's amazing to me that the father was able to provide the opportunity and excitement and enjoyment that his son Rick felt. And really it was kind of an inspirational thing, and they were really kind of an advocate for accessibility to some of these races and just inclusion in general, and raising awareness for individuals with disabilities like Rick had. Obviously his were very severe, but they raised tons of just money and awareness and everything else kind of for people wanting to compete and participate with disabilities. So really kind of cool.
With cerebral palsy, like I know it's like a muscle thing, right? Or the nervous system issue. Was he like all there mentally?
I think he was. Yeah. So I think he was there mentally. He couldn't really formulate words, I think, but I think it was more of a physical restriction than it was so much as a mental restriction.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, you could see him in his communicating. It kind of seemed like it was a lot of just kind of like grunts and oohs and ahs and things like that. But I mean, even if he had a kind of a lower mentality of like an 8 or a 10 or a 12-year-old or whatever, still able to understand what was going on.
Oh, interesting.
So in 2021, in March of 2021, Dick Hoyt, the father, passed away. And obviously, after he passed away, they kind of slowed down with the races and everything before, and then that was kind of going into the whole kind of COVID time period and everything.
Yeah,
I don't know if that was related to his passing or not. But he was getting quite old because this journey started in 1977.
Jeez. Wow.
So Team Hoyt continues to inspire people, continues to inspire us, and just kind of the bond between father and son and the extraordinary things that that people can do together, right? And not only for physical health, but mental health. And it made me think of, are there things that I can do now that my children can't do for themselves, like opportunities that I can provide that would help them to feel accomplished or help them to feel supported in their desires. And so I just want to kind of plant that seed a little bit with the story of Team Hoyt.
Yeah, that's really good. I think sometimes, like, as fathers, we just think about our responsibility. Well, you think about your responsibility to your kids. Sometimes I actually think about, sometimes I'm like, okay, Father's Day, like, it's a time of reflection for me. It's like, well, am I the father that I want to be? But then I think it's important to remember my father, and how appreciative I am of him. And sometimes you just get so focused on your own family that you're like, wait a second. My father taught me a lot of stuff, and he did some good things that I appreciate, and some of those I plan to emulate and try to emulate with my own kids, and then obviously like any son, try to do a little bit better. I hope my kids are better. Our dad has said that all the time. He's like, I hope you're a better dad than I am. Not that our dad was a bad dad, but the idea would being is like, you hope your children are just like, and I always thought that was weird that like sometimes kids would, like, parent or dads would compete would be like, oh, my son's never going to be as good as I am. Like, I want my kids to be better than me, and I want them to be better men, and that's something our dad has always said, which always kind of made me wonder why, dads would always put their kids down or think that their kids aren't good enough. Why wouldn't you try to be constantly trying to build up your kids? I never really understood that, but
Yeah. Well, and I definitely feel like we were supported and encouraged and given a great example of a father, and kind of a great baseline of where to start in raising our own kids.
yeah,
But yeah, I completely agree. I mean, it's just generationally, if you're always trying to improve the next generation better than yourself, to be stronger than you. I want my kids to be stronger than me and stronger than my weaknesses, and not, I want to pass on the good stuff and not the bad stuff.
yeah,
Right. I think if that is like the goal of the family, right, that's a legacy in and of itself. Imagine 10 generations from now. Imagine how amazing those people can be. If we're still around by then.
Oh, Tom, dude, I got 4 boys, man. There's definitely going to be Thomases around, and you got 3 boys and a girl, so there's going to be plenty of Thomases around.
I was talking more like 10 generations from now, but
but yeah, totally. Like, what are we going to pass on? They probably won't remember us from 10 generations from now. They'll probably just be like, oh, that old podcast. But what's cool now is that, like, we look back 10 generations ago, and it's like, the 1700s or earlier than that, and it's like, there's no record of those people. We have no idea. So barring some type of apocalyptic event, it's kind of cool that people 10 generations now could go back and they could listen to their grandparent, their great grandpas, yeah. Let's say
talking about this stuff,
talking about just movies and being a good dad and stuff like that.
It's on the internet. We're out there, and
so as long as the internet doesn't get shut down.
Yeah, well, I don't know. It might change, but I don't think there'll be massive loss of information. But you never know.
Maybe we'll have to put all these on a hard drive and put it on like a metal disc and bury it in the ground and say time capsule it or something. Yeah,
put them on like floppy disks or something.
Yeah, that way, like in the future, like what was that Demolition Man? When like the only restaurant that survived was Taco Bell.
Yeah. Seriously.
And then, so they had,
and that was like the fancy restaurant.
Yeah. So maybe if like our podcast survives the pending apocalypse, like that will be the only way people can remember the 20th and 21st century.
Hey,
man,
I don't think that'd be such a bad thing.
I don't think so either. So, well, all right, guys,
they'll start fresh and figure out how to start a new nation with a brother's creed.
That's right. Let's start with a good foundation, at least.
Yeah.
So everyone out there, go give your dad a call. So give your appreciation for him, and try to be the best dad that you can be, and maybe see how you can teach one of your kids to follow in your footsteps, or how you can give your kids opportunities to become successful themselves. So with that, let's build our creeds together.
All right, let's do it.